In this video, you're going to be creating notes that you can use on your summative about graphing inequalities when you have those greater than and less than signs. Take your white sheet of paper and fold it into 4 parts, but make sure that as you draw your lines along the folds that you have this center rectangle as well. We're going to be taking notes in each of the quadrants and in the middle. Pause the video, go ahead and create that on your white sheet of paper. I'm going to start in the center box. And all we want to remind ourselves in the center box is that if we happen to solve for star, that we make sure we take our star and we change it to x, right? We know that we're always solving for x, and that's what we want to graph on our number line, is the value of x. But if we are going to change our star, we also then, if we need to change from star to x, we also need to change the direction of our arrow. If our arrow was going left, then it will face right. If it was going right, then it will face left. So we need to change our arrow to, I'm going to see if I can write small with this. The opposite direction. Hopefully your writing is neater. The last thing, of course, we want to do is to take our number, which is the third thing in our row, right? And we want to change our number to either a negative or positive, the opposite of what it was. So we're used to taking star and changing it to x, and that usually meant that we would change this right here, and we would change this right here. When we're solving inequalities, however, we also have to change the direction of our arrow. So we'll see that as we practice again on Monday, and you should recognize that when you're checking your answer key as you work. So I'm going to focus in on the first quadrant here, and we are going to label this the greater than quadrant. And the way that we record greater than looks like this. And I know it's greater than because the greater or bigger part of the arrow comes first when I read from left to right. So greater than, if we record some examples, looks like x is greater than 5. That means that all the answers that make sense for this would be to the right of 5 on the number line. So I'm going to make my number line. I'm going to label it with a 5. And what I'm going to observe is that this is a greater than symbol. So I do need to record the fact that my answer reflects anything greater than 5. It could be 5.1, it could be 6, it could be 200,000. Anything greater than 1 counts as an acceptable answer to this problem. But because there is no line underneath, it's not greater than or equal to, I have to leave this an open circle because this says that the answer x is greater than 5. It does not include 5. So I show that by leaving an open circle, and then I graph to the right. What you'll start to notice is if you always have your x first, this arrow here will tell you exactly the direction that you need to make your arrow in. That only works now if x is over here. So let's go down and let's look at one that is the same but slightly different. You also have greater than or equal to, greater than or equal to, an example would look like x is greater than or equal to -1. So these two things read the same. The greater part of the arrow up here in greater than comes first. The greater part of the arrow comes first here too, but I read it as greater than or equal to because of this line right here. So in my number line, I want to make sure that I account for the most important number of this problem, which is a -1. And I also have to consider that I'm building my number line on the negative side, so my numbers sort of what we would call increase go to the left, and this would be 0. And now when I'm graphing this one, this statement says that x is greater than or equal to -1, and I show that or equal to by shading in that dot. As we said before, if we have our x on the left, this shows me the direction that my arrow should go, so I can use that as a guide for my own arrow that I fill in right here. I'm going to move up to the quadrant right here, and let's start talking about less than. My symbol for less than, just like you would imagine, looks like this. And an example of less than might be, let's see, x is less than 4. So on my number line, just like my greater than, when I say x is less than 4, I am not including 4 in that. It doesn't say less than 4 or equal to 4. It only says less than 4. So I leave my open circle when I have this type of symbol, and I make my arrow matching the direction of this arrow going to the left. All right, now we're going to throw a twist into this. We are going to do the quadrant for less than or equal to. And we're going to do 2 examples. We're going to do example 1, which is pretty basic. X is less than or equal to -6. We will graph that on the negative part of the number line. So if I'm making just 3 hash marks, I want to make sure I include my -6, -7, -5. And as I make my dot, I notice that just like with greater than or equal to, less than or equal to is telling me with this little line that it's not just numbers less than x, numbers less than -6. It's numbers less than -6 or equal to -6. So I show that it could actually be -6 by shading in the dot, and now I can follow the direction of the arrow. Now take this paper, put it in your folder or somewhere safe, because this is something you are allowed to use on your summative assessment. Move on to your next task.